Very good evening to all the Rotarians and viewers. We have tonight, a very distinguished, illustrious panel, and the panel collectively have enormous degree of leadership and experience in different field of endeavor, and I will try to very briefly introduce our panel members. I'll just follow the alphabetical order. The first person I would like to introduce is Dr. Randeep Guleria, who is the director of All India Institute of Management Sciences. He is a Padma Shri, recipient of many awards, including BC Roy Awards, and and also very importantly, he is a member of National Task Force on COVID. With me is the Mr. Amitabh Kant. He is today the CEO of Niti Aayog. He has been an IS officer and in governments in many areas, but more importantly, he is Niti Aayog. He is part of transforming India, and he has been responsible for many government initiatives, including the Make in India, Branding India, Incredible India campaigns. And is one of the very unique government IS officer who thinks of vision and of tomorrow. And the image one have is very different when you meet with him. He's always bubbling with new ideas. So we are indeed very happy to have him today. The next one I have is Mr. Nandan Nilekani, who is a Padma Bhushan. He is a co-founder and the chairman of Infosys Technologies. And what that is an organization he has created. More importantly, has been in the government and created Aadhaar, which is a very unique identification of more than 1 billion people. And this is something like this, no one has accepted. We have in India this system. He has received many awards and he was considered the 100 top influential person by Forbes magazine and by Foreign Policy magazine at various times. He has written a very interesting book, Imagining India, and that is where we will tap his brain while discussing some of the aspect of the future. My good friend and my colleague, Mr. Pankaj Patel, we know each other for last several decades. He is the chairman of Zydus, and he has the innovator of a new vaccine which is being developed, and we will discuss with him about that. He is also the chairman of IIM Udaipur and a board of governors IIM Ahmedabad. He was also a past president of Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Ajit Ranade is one of the leading economists in the country, and he's the president and a chief economist of Aditya Birla Group. He has been a research advisory panel of Indian Institute of Banking. He's obviously IIT, IIM graduate and a PhD with the Brown University, USA. Last but not the least, Dr. Pratap Reddy, Padma Vibhushan, founder and chairman of India's first corporate hospital, Apollo Group. 75 hospitals today he has created in this country. And actually he has given a birth to corporate hospitals in the country. And many of his Apollo Hospital work has been discussed as a case study topic at Harvard Business University. So welcome to all of you. And what we'll try to do, have a sub-conversation on the way forward for managing pandemic challenges. The last pandemic the world has seen was in early 90s, 1919, where we had swine flu, where nearly 40 to 50 million people have died when there were no vaccines, no treatment. And today, at least we have now the vaccines available. But what is unfortunate happened was for last 30 years, scientists have been predicting a possibility of this pandemic. Some of the movies have come talking of the pandemic. World spends nearly $4 trillion on managing healthcare every year. But we were totally not prepared when the pandemic hit us. And I think that is a great learning. I think we in the world and the healthcare area, today we have worldwide more than 50 million people affected. In India, we have 10 million. And about 1.5% are fatal when they receive in India. Worldwide, this average is 4%. And in some of the Western countries, it is as high as 7 or 8%. Our economy has lost tens of trillions of dollars in GDP during this 9-10 months of pandemic, and it is likely to continue some more time. But on the very positive side, that the vaccine discovery generally takes 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, has taken time within 1 year. Several new platform of vaccine has been discovered, like messenger RNA. Now, we have only 3 or 4 platform over last 60, 70 years. To develop entirely a new platform itself is, from a research point of view, it's a great thing happening. And what is equally important, that we already have 5 or 6 vaccines worldwide approved. In India, there are 3 vaccines, 2 are already approved, 1 is on the way very soon. So this also shown India's emergence for innovative research program through COVID vaccine. And therefore, let us get back into our discussion today. And this is where I like to quote Mother Teresa. She said, "Yesterday is gone. Tomorrow has not yet come. We have only today. So let us begin." So I would like to begin by asking Mr. Amitabh Kant first, that what is the government thinking and approach, and maybe Dr. Randeep Guleria can join afterwards, of vaccinating in India. And when do you believe, is it going to be free for all, or would it be restricted to a certain number of people? Because there confusing news comes every day in the paper. So we would like to know from you, what is the government approach of vaccinating India?
So thank you very much. I'd first like to say that India is a very big manufacturing hub of vaccines around the world. We have 19 companies. We've done a lot of vaccine development for rotavirus, Japanese encephalitis, typhoid and malaria. And our Indian industry and R&D enterprise has really risen to this COVID-19 pandemic. There are 5 key strategic principles which India has adopted for the COVID vaccination. Firstly, that there should be very orderly, smooth implementation, which is being driven by technology. And secondly, there is no compromise of existing healthcare programs, especially national programs and primary care. And thirdly, we utilize the experience of universal immunization program and the experience that we have of election. And fourthly, ensure people's participation. And I would also like to say that a lot of learnings have come from the Aadhaar movement, which Mr. Nandan Nilekani had led. And we've also said that there will be no compromise on scientific and regulatory norms, and our standard operating procedures have been laid out. We've done a clear prioritization of beneficiaries, and the priority is to really protect the health and pandemic response system and reduce deaths due to COVID-19. So the priority groups for phase 1 COVID-19 vaccination is really about healthcare workers, frontline workers, the personnel from state and central police departments, armed forces, home guard, civil defense, and also the prioritized age group, the persons above the age of 50 years and persons with less than 50 years but with associated comorbidities, and the prioritized age group, which is persons less than 50 years with associated comorbidities. And we going about it in a very, very systematic, methodical manner. As you are all aware, there are we've focused on a lot of innovation that has taken place, both on AstraZeneca, which the Serum Institute has led, and the Bharat Biotech vaccine. But a wide network of cold chain stores have been created at different levels, and we are working through a series of supply mechanism through the government medical store depots, where stock will be maintained for a maximum of three months, and 4 GMSTs in India have been created. But broadly, I would say that a lot of homework and a detailed action plan has been laid out so as to lead this in a very systematic and methodical manner. And after the first phase, we will work out the second round of strategy.
Dr. Randeep Guleria, would you like to add anything? And how do you see the scenario of COVID going forward when part of the country would be getting vaccinated in next few months? Also, I just want to ask this time the question also that the 2 vaccines which are approved, one is the Oxford vaccine and another is Bharat Biotech vaccine. And there was a statement by you also that Bharat Biotech vaccine is reserved. And obviously the phase 3 clinical trial is not yet over. So in other words, the safety data may be available, but what is in a double-blind study, what about the efficacy data? And some of the states have a reservation. So would you like to clarify this confusion?
I think I'll start with the second question first, because that is the one which is more contentious. I think it's important to understand that what we were trying to say was that this is an add-on as compared to what is already available, because the maximum number of doses are barely available from Serum Institute of India. When you're having a pandemic situation and you're wanting to control a pandemic, you will have to accept certain things which you would not have done in a non-pandemic situation. So if you were to look at a vaccine in a non-pandemic situation, even the Serum Institute vaccine, or I would say even the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine, you would want more data in terms of long-term efficacy. Currently, the long-term efficacy data for all the vaccines is not there. We don't know which vaccine will last for 6 months, which will last for 1 year, and how quickly the efficacy will wane. But you have to really understand that in a pandemic situation, you will have to take decisions looking at whatever data is available and having your prioritization correct. The priority that India had was that it should be safe and there should be good immunogenic data. We accept the fact that the efficacy data may not be that strong, but there is good immunogenic data which indirectly suggests that the vaccine is likely to be effective. However, in an ideal situation, one would like to have good randomized control trials, the phase 3 trial, and good number of events. Good number of people should have got COVID infection, and then you would break the code and then see how many of them had been vaccinated and how many had got placebo. But if we were to do that, it may take quite some time. And we are in a situation where there is a lot of concern about things happening in the other parts of the world, especially in Europe and UK, where because of the variant strain, and even in South Africa, it was decided that we need to be able to do something for a situation where you don't have any treatment available. Remember, till today, we don't have any antiviral which is effective. And because we have really no treatment against COVID-19, looking at the data and looking at the population that we would need to vaccinate, it was said that this may also be added on as another vaccine, but it will the data will evolve, and that's why it's still in a trial mode. But at least you will be able to provide certain efficacies. And globally, this has been done by different countries. I mean, even if you look at what UK has done, UK has changed its entire treatment strategy because of what they happened. They're now the second dose is being extended to 12 weeks. They're even looking at giving the second, mixing the vaccines. The first person may get Pfizer and he may later on get the AstraZeneca vaccine. There is no scientific data on this. So in a pandemic situation, you will have to do things which may not be totally right, but they may have some evidence to suggest that they are beneficial. And this, I think, is the controversy which got created. But if we really need to quickly vaccinate 30 crore people, that is 60 crore doses are needed. And 30 crore is actually almost equivalent to the population of the United States of America. And this is just for phase one. We will need as many vaccine shots as we can get. And therefore, I think, I'm not even talking about Bharat Biotech. I think if we have good data from the Sputnik vaccine or from the vaccine which comes out from Zydus Cadila, we should take it as early as possible, because we need to have as many vaccines available for our country. So I think we should look at it from that point of view rather than getting into the nitty-gritties of 60% efficacy, 80%. We have to save lives and we have to get over this pandemic, not only from the point of view of the economy and other things, but a lot of other things, education for that matter, or non-COVID related work for patients are suffering a lot because COVID has really put a lot of non-COVID work on hold. So I think that is something that we need to keep in mind. Now, coming to the first question, the way forward, I think we need to be aggressive because we are at a place where I think the country is in a very, very comfortable position now. Our cases have coming down, our recovery rate is high, our mortality is the lowest in the world, and people are really quite surprised as how are we managing this. We managed to really come out of this pandemic in a situation much better than many countries which had a health system which was far advanced as compared to ours. But then we should not sit on our laurels. We need to really work aggressively so that we don't have another spike, and we need to invest so that we are ready not only for any mutation that may happen in this virus, but like we are saying, for future pandemics. So surveillance has to become very active. We have to invest in genomic surveillance and other things. So I think these are activities that we need to look at as we move forward as far as the pandemic is concerned.
So you have rightly highlighted that in a pandemic situation, saving lives are important, and science has to be interpreted correctly for various decision making taken, and not go by what is historically done in a normal circumstances, because circumstances are very unusual. Nandan, I would like to ask, because you have been playing a very important role, I believe, in distribution, and since the government has identified the priorities of vaccinating various people, and I believe the government is also using Aadhaar. Could you enlighten everyone that what is it exactly the digital approach one is taking in this kind of large-scale vaccination of the entire population? You are mute. Yeah. Thank you.
I think the government has been very proactive on the technology side, and they have developed a platform called CoWIN, which is an extension of an earlier platform called EVIN. Now, EVIN was primarily meant for vaccine supply chain management. And the CoWIN extension is also to record the vaccination and the person who was vaccinated. So this is something which is very important, because we want to build, India needs to build a highly scalable architecture for vaccination, because if we want to achieve herd immunity as soon as possible, we may have to go to millions of vaccinations per day kind of an approach. And that requires a very strong digital backbone. And I think we can take the CoWIN, and with a few more things, it can be highly scalable. Also, the other important thing that the government is doing, which people don't give enough attention to, is the idea of having a digital vaccination certificate. Because a vaccination serves three purposes. One purpose is for the health and protection of the individual. The second purpose is the public health goal of getting herd immunity and reducing transmission. And the third is to unlock the economy and allow people to travel freely. And when people start traveling freely, they're going to be asked whether they have a test or whether they have a vaccination. And if they have a digital vaccination certificate on their phone or a printout or on the cloud on the DigiLocker system, and they can show that certificate at that point, and that certificate can be verified that it's a genuine certificate, then I think you can also unlock the economy very fast. So the government is proposing to issue such digital certificates to everyone, and India will be the first country in the world to issue a digital vaccination certificate, which is verifiable. So I think that's a very important part of what's happening. I do, however, believe that the current model of vaccination will have to be enlarged, because now it's purely through a government channel, and that may make sense for the first 3 crore health workers and essential workers. But the moment you get to the 27 crore people above the age of 50 and comorbidities, the vaccination will have to be opened up, because just the government channel will not be able to cope with the volume. And here again, Aadhaar has a very important role to play, because Aadhaar also has the age of the individual. And if you have a rule that says people above the age of 50 only have to be vaccinated, then we can give the vaccines even to a private company like Apollo or yourselves or anyone, and say you can only use this vaccination for above the age of 50 and submit proof with an Aadhaar authentication and the age of the person vaccinated. So that way we can unlock the vaccination and not limit it to only one channel. So I think technology has a very important role to play. The government has done a great start with CoWIN, but there are a few more things to be done to get the scale and the loosening up some of the things so that we are able to get to millions of vaccinations per day. I'll stop here and come back later if there's a question.
Yeah. No, I would like to go to now Mr. Pankaj Patel. And I would like to congratulate you for a very bold decision you have taken to develop a vaccine. And I believe that it is in a phase 3 clinical trial. So when do you expect your vaccine to be likely to be there in the available for vaccination? And what do you think in terms of availability of vaccine required? Because if all vaccine requires 1, 2, or 3 doses, we are really talking of 2.5 billion doses of vaccine required. So could you like to throw some light on the research as well as the availability of vaccine? You are mute, Pankaj. Pankaj, you are mute. Yeah, thank you.
So very good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me to share my views. So our vaccine is currently undergoing the phase 3 study. We have very encouraging data for phase 1 and phase 2 data with respect to the immune response and the safety of the vaccine. As you are aware that we are using a DNA platform technology, and this is a DNA plasmid vaccine. The main important point to understand here is that these will not, the DNA will not get converted into anything else in the body. And as a result, it has been proven in past that the safety of this platform is very good. And that's the reason why we selected DNA as a platform to develop the vaccine. Our phase 3 studies are undergoing now, and depends upon when we touch the magic number of 150 COVID positive number, that's the time we would have the phase 3 readout. And that will tell us about the details about the vaccine efficacy. And that's the time we would like to offer the vaccine to the people. Of course, if there is emergency requirement and if there are some specific things comes up, we would discuss with the government in right invest and make sure that if there is a need, we can also support the government. With respect to the manufacturing, we have set up a plant to manufacture about 150 million doses of the vaccine per year, and we're planning to work with other companies to actually manufacture this vaccine also, to ensure that large quantity of the vaccine is available, because it's not only India, but the whole world is looking at India now for getting the vaccine, because the vaccine which is developed in the developed world has a limited ability, and that would only go into the developed world. The whole of the rest of the world, which is a large population, will still need a lot of vaccine from India in particular. Just to tell you, Habil, further, there our second platform technology vaccine, which is basically a vector-based vaccine, and we have used a measles vector vaccine. And that is currently undergoing the preclinical toxicity, and soon we will be moving into also clinical phase for that vaccine. So we are working on two, and also we are working on the third platform, which we'll tell later on. But I think very important point, Habil, just to add here, though you not ask me, I would like to add here that we need vaccine and we also need treatment. So absolutely at the same time, we need to work on treatment, and I'm happy to inform that our monoclonal antibody cocktail has been undergoing preclinical toxicity at this moment, and we expect by March we will move into clinic with monoclonal antibody cocktail, which could be one of the possible treatment for COVID. And of course, there are a lot many other things which is being done by several players in India and abroad. Finally, I would like to say that all this is possible in India because the government has been very proactive, very supportive, and the kind of thing which we are talking about in past about bureaucracy, red tape, delay, we have not seen in COVID times. Everybody is willing to help. Everybody is willing to discuss. Everybody is open to meet us, talk to us 24/7 and help us to move forward. So it's a great effort done by the whole country, and that's why we see the results that we have vaccines available, and we also at the same time much better outcome of the COVID pandemic.
Pankaj, what you have rightly said, that there is a great symbiosis and collective approach of the companies, private companies, the research organization also, it is involved, manufacturing, regulatory, and also some financial support also government has given. Do you believe that India has become a fairly important player in pharmaceuticals, and Prime Minister says we are the pharmacy of the world? In USA, the generic pharma has a 40% market share. Do you think this gives you a great opportunity for India to become a very important player in a drug discovery space in next 20, 25 years? If the right kind of policies and financial support is available. What do you think of this, Pankaj?
So I think we have proven that India can do it, and Indian scientists can do it. So I have a great belief on our scientific people. In fact, if you see the Western world, where big companies who have been doing research, most of the people working there are of Indian origin, who have been graduated and learned from India and then went into different countries, got jobs, and they're working there. So if environment is created, ecosystem is created in India, I am clearly seeing that India can do definitely what Habil you said, and I think your companies are working on that area. We also work, but several other companies have started working on it, and we need to really give them a boost. But great learning of COVID-19 should actually teach us how to move forward.
The other important phenomena, if you have noticed, it is the smaller companies like the German company with Pfizer, Oxford University with AstraZeneca. So the research has been taken, discovery taken by the small company. You don't need large company to innovate. The larger companies help in terms of clinical trials, organizing, and marketing. Uniquely, Indian companies have that advantage of manufacturing and marketing distribution. And if we can, as in India, come with a policy framework of taking this, that we can be an innovative hub of the world also, along with the few countries which are already there. May I now come to Dr. Pratap Reddy? You have 75 hospitals. You have experienced a large number of patients coming for COVID. And what is your learning you have as a hospital chain to manage this COVID patient, because you have to keep it separate. You can't make sure that it doesn't happen. And at the same time, this also gives an opportunity from Indian healthcare of developing some kind of excellence, which I know Apollo Hospital is also working on some of the areas of breakthrough healthcare approach. Would you like to say a few words on that?
Thank you, Habib. First, I must compliment the government and all the others who made India safe as we are today. But as far as Apollo is concerned, I think for 3 decades we've been continuously improving the quality of delivery and clinical excellence in each of these fields, and I think that made a significant impact. Along with it, I think we followed whatever the government directions are, the 3 major things that they have advocated, which made a significant impact. But more importantly, I think we introduced what's called 24/7, where people could call in and say whether their symptoms are COVID or non-COVID symptoms. If it is COVID symptoms, we send them for testing, and then if the testing is positive, we had what's called the Kavach, where we took about 3,000 rooms across the country, and nearly 40,000 of our hospital beds were allotted for this purpose. They were either treated in the hotel, and then they had the direct teleconsults with the patient and the doctor, and our home team managed them at the hotels. Then later on, if they needed, in the hospital, depending on the doctor's advice, and managed either in the individually or sometimes in the intensive care units. And all of these, I think, have made a very significant impact in first bringing down the panic in the people who have either not got it or got the symptoms by 24/7. But I think overall management, I would say, with the guidance, must complement the public healthcare, private healthcare. It didn't separate itself as saying we are different, but we all work together towards this goal of saying, what can we do in this most difficult situation in treating patients? That is why I think our mortality, our way of management of patients have made a very significant impact. So I pay a great tribute to the doctors and the nurses and all the superheroes who supported us during all of these periods. But I think we have a lot more to learn now that tomorrow is going to be the day when the vaccination is going to come. We want to see that vaccination reaches people as early as possible and as many people as possible in the shortest possible time. This is what Ananda Nilekani clearly pointed out. I think we all should see what is it that we can do. As far as private healthcare is concerned, as far as Apollo is concerned, we have all of the facilities to be able to inoculate a sufficient number of people, large number of people on each day, so that we could complete this program as early as possible. But we will not violate what the government has, because they have got clear guidelines. When they ask us, all that I want to say is Apollo Hospital and other private hospitals are ready to participate in this vaccination program and make the country as safe as possible and receive as many vaccinations as possible in the shortest possible time. Because that's our goal. Our goal is not to give vaccination for the people, to give vaccination for all the people who are vulnerable, for all the people who are called the comorbidity, and for all the other people who want to be protective. So I think it's a large number, because our numbers are not comparable anywhere in the world. But I think in India, we need to be able to handle this large number of people. All that I can say is government has made several efforts and we are with them. We will not violate any of their directions. But when they ask us, all that I can say is we are prepared. We have made our drills possible. We have checked out how we can deliver large number of vaccinations on each day. So all of these are possible. But our greater strength was in management.
Thank you.
And our results. I just want to say only one more thing.
Yes,
We had a district hospital in Chittor. Even there, the mortality figure is less than 1%. We had 200 COVID patients in the district hospital. Even in the district hospital, because we had this, what's called the Red Book, and whatever the government instructions continuously gave in the management, all that has been followed. And this is where I think India is, we are proud that India had guidelines followed, given by the government and the various responsible authorities, and everybody has fallen in line with it, which has made a very significant impact in both, especially in the case of morbidity and the recovery process.
Thank you very much. It was very enlightening. To Mr. Ajit Ranade, as an economist, what kind of situation you see post-COVID? Is there anything which worries you?
So, Dr. Abil, thank you. I'd like to say that this we were discussing a lot on vaccine deployment. So this massive, large-scale deployment of vaccine, I see it as a dual stimulus. It's both a health stimulus and a fiscal stimulus for the country. Just at an average, a conservative price of 200 to 300 rupees per dose, imagine 500 million doses, just not only the cost of the dosage, but including the entire system of the supply chain, the paramedical and medical staff, the professionals. I see it as almost like a 1 lakh, between 1 and 1.5 lakh crores of stimulus. Now, how much of it will be funded by the exchequer, the treasury of the government, and how much private sector we can discuss. And in fact, organizations like Rotarians would have I think would have a significant role to play. But this itself is a big stimulus. Secondly, I would like to reiterate what Mr. Pankaj said. It's not only about vaccine, but it's also about treatment, but it's also about the third thing, which is prevention. So in fact, India has demonstrated to the world, we have been able to flatten the curve remarkably well. And of course, fatality rate is also low. So there's a triple approach. There's vaccine, there's treatment, and there's prevention. And I think the third thing is about communication. As I think Dr. Reddy also said, what we need is, the consumer confidence, and I mean, consumers will come out, for example, all the footfalls in retail sector. There will be confidence when we have confidence about the efficacy of the vaccine and the treatment. But there also consumers will spend when they have much more confidence that business is hiring, there's recruitment. And business will have confidence only when they say consumer spending. So in a way, business confidence for capex and recruitment is dependent on consumer confidence, and consumer confidence is in turn dependent on business confidence. And this is where communication can play a role. And it's not only about the government coming forward. I think this organization like Rotarians, this has to be led equally by private sector, in the public and private combination, that we need to have a strong communication about this recovery process. You began by quoting Mother Teresa. We should not look at yesterday, because if you look at the growth rates, the growth rate of the economy this year is unfortunately going to be -7 or -8. You can't look at the future because you can't do forecasting exercise. I think this year, if you focus on the present, if you look at quarter to quarter, you saw the quarterly results for the September ending quarter. We are getting results for the December ending quarter. Quarter to quarter, we are seeing a remarkable recovery. In fact, a lot of the economists and analysts are surprised at how sharp the rebound is. I submit to you that the rebound will depend on this interplay between consumer and business confidence. And that's where the health stimulus, I call it a dual stimulus, which is health and fiscal stimulus. That's going to be very important. And lastly, one point I'd like to make is this pandemic has given us this opportunity of a dual, a great resurgence in not just the health aspect, which is a whole system of health, pharmacy, scientists, vaccine, drugs, but also digital. I think Mr. Nandan mentioned that. So this combination of digital and health has got a huge, has had a huge impetus. And lastly, you began by asking me, what do I worry about? Economists always worry about lots of things. But I'd like to say that I would worry especially, or pay more attention to the financial sector, especially the banking sector, because the Reserve Bank of India has done a lot of, has helped a lot through its stimulus programs, and there's been a forbearance, there's been moratorium, there's been, there's been a standstill on recognition of NPAs. But once all of this goes away early next year, next few quarters, we do not need to be confronted with a sudden spike in NPAs. Even the RBI governor has been talking about it. So that's where I think we'll need to focus a lot of attention. to recapitalize the banks, and to get the banking credit system growing again.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you have very interestingly highlighted that this vaccination program itself can be a great stimulus, both because of vaccine and the whole infrastructure which will be used for vaccination. Since Mr. Nandan Nilekani has to go a little early, so let me ask two questions to him. One is, you've been a great business leader, and you have seen that during COVID period, we have learned to manage with less resources and become more efficient. So would you like to share some of the areas where the business can use this experience and restructure their business in future? That is question number one. Second, you mentioned you have written the book Imagining in India, and especially on education. What is the role India should play, and what would happen to educate our people? Which we have the education, but the quality of education is not to be desired. So would digital India can transform the education system in India over the next 10 years or so?
Thank you, Habil. And these are both very important and interesting questions. As you pointed out, we have seen digital acceleration during COVID, and digital trends which would have taken years to happen have happened in weeks. And I think that has an impact on every company. The one thing that we have learned is that we can all work from home. I mean, just to give you an example, at Infosys, we have 240,000 or more employees in 40 countries. And in the month of March, when the lockdown started, within a matter of a couple of weeks, all these people were working from home on their laptops in a fully secure environment. And that is now continued for 9 months. So we know that we can work from home. And therefore, what this means is that post-pandemic also, a hybrid model of working will evolve, where some people, unless you are in the proximity service, in a lot of services, you can do it remotely. So, something like 2/3 of the people will always come to the office, 1/3 will come home and work from home and so on. And this has implications on how we design offices, how we design workflows, how cities get designed, impact on traffic, impact on pollution. So I think this is a huge thing that is going to change all businesses. And COVID has also shown that we need to reinvent all our business processes and eliminate unnecessary activities. Because when you're doing something distributed, collaborative, you have to make it as efficient as possible. So I think there's a massive thrust around the world to reimagine business processes in a digital manner. So that's on the business side. On the education side, actually, India has done something remarkable. The Ministry of HRD has launched the Diksha program, which is a program to use digital to accelerate learning. And this program has done very well in the COVID times. Millions of teachers have got trained online. Millions of textbooks have got, they have QR codes, and children can just use the phone and look at the QR code and read the content. So the Diksha program is actually a great success story, and it has accelerated during pandemic. And just recently, the Ministry of Human Resources, Ministry of Education, and the World Bank had organized a seminar for African countries on December 18th, where a dozen African countries were very keen to replicate the Indian model. So this is another example of made in India, made for the world. And I think digital education has been accelerated, and the government has done a tremendous job already.
Thank you very much. Great to have you. My next query is to
Thank you. So I'll leave. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nandan, very much. It was a great contribution you made to the panel discussion.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Dr. Randeep Guleria, what we are seeing here in India is a very steep decline in the COVID cases and the mortality. The question is, in the West, this mutation and whatever is happening in UK, USA, and other Western countries, there is a sudden spike which is higher than the peak they had earlier. Even China reported yesterday that they have millions of people getting into lockdown situation. What do you expect here, that this decline is there, this will continue, and with vaccination, we may not have another peak coming up, or coming up, the peak is inevitable.
I think India's situation is rather unique, and this has been some sort of a paradox in a large number of people as to why is it that, considering our population and considering the events that have happened in the last few months, including elections in many states and festives and other things, we've not had a spike. And I think that is related to multiple factors. It's an actual fact because our testing actually has gone up, and we're doing more RT-PCR based tests, which will give you a real picture of what is happening. And even in states which have had elections and had huge election rallies, there has actually not been a spike in the number of cases. So I personally feel that because of a number of factors, which could include that we are a younger population as compared to the Western world, we do have a lot of other exposures during our lifetime, which really boosts our immunity much more than what it does abroad because of recurrent infections, parasitic and others, and exposure even to the other coronaviruses which cause a mild flu-like symptom. And of course, the theory that BCG vaccine also gives us some degree of protection. We have some degree of protection, and we have also acquired some degree of possible good amount of herd immunity because of the number of cases and the spikes that we've had over the last 6-7 months. Therefore, I think that we possibly will not really follow the West in terms of a spike of the magnitude that they are seeing. There may be some ups and downs in depending upon different areas, but I don't really see the type of picture that was happening in the West happening in India. But having said that, it doesn't really mean that we can be complacent. We really need to be aggressive in terms of rolling out the vaccine as early as possible. That's going to be a big step, but also continuing to really push for COVID appropriate behavior till we are certain that we have enough people vaccinated to really say that we are in a sort of a safe situation. And at the same time, there is what is already happening, and I'm hopeful that in the next few days we'll have some data out, to get some serosurveillance data done, to give us some evidence as to what is the protection that we have acquired in the community in terms of people having had mild infection and recovered, and therefore not now having an increase in the number of cases. But I think we should really take advantage of the current situation that we have and push aggressively forward so that we are able to decline it further and really don't go the way that other countries have gone. I don't think that will happen. But having said that, we need to work aggressively to make sure it doesn't happen.
From a positive note, we conclude this part of the session and we move to the next part of the session. Can India convert this into an opportunity? Because it is always when you have challenges and difficulties, there is a lot of new learning takes place. And sometimes India, we have probably a possibility in some of the areas to convert this into a global competitive advantage. As Gandhiji has rightly said, the future depends on what we do today. So may I ask my first question to Mr. Amitabh Kant on this subject? This is an issue regarding the healthcare itself to begin with. Government spend on healthcare is very small, less than 2% combined. And most of the spend, about 80%, is by the individuals, maybe through insurance, some directly from their pockets and through ESIS scheme. The West spends between 10 and 12%, US spends about 18%. What is it we need to do to make the healthcare, the entire population, make it available, the basic healthcare facility and the treatment? And there is a different approach available? Like, for example, if we grow GDP at say 7% or 8%, if the healthcare industry grows its GDP at double the rate, their growth, over 10 years, this 5-6% spend can become 10-11%, and we can even be spending on and providing healthcare. So is Niti Aayog has some ideas on restructuring the healthcare for India?
So, you know, I'm a long-term believer in the fact that it's not possible for India to grow at high rates of 8 to 9% per annum on a long-term basis of 3 decades unless we don't lay a lot of focus on health and nutrition. And, the 2% that we spend of our GDP on health is extremely low, and we must take it to 5% of our expenditure. And I think there is to be a huge emphasis on primary health care. One of the things that we've rolled out was the primary health and wellness centers. 150,000 of them, out of which 50,000 of them have already, as a part of Ayushman Bharat scheme, 50,000 of them, close to 50,000 of them are already operational. And the objective really is that prevention is the best form of disease, and therefore if we are able to across the country put a lot of emphasis and resources in the primary health care, we will really transform our health system, and that is really the key. And secondly, as you are aware, we've rolled out PMJ, which is really the biggest insurance scheme across the world, and it is totally digital. It is cashless, paperless, covering over 500 million Indians, which is more than the population of USA and Europe put together. And we need to expand on that and also cover the missing middle of India through some kind of a payment mechanism, so that eventually we are able to cover all vulnerable sections of India's population. But I'm clearly of the view that India needs to spend much more on health and nutrition, and nutrition also is a very, very important task which India has to do. But let me put this in a perspective, because the cumulative COVID deaths recorded per million of population up to 2020, end of 2020 in India, were around 109 per million. And that is compared to 587 globally, 227 in developing countries, and 828 in developed nations. So we managed both lives and livelihood quite well in the midst of this very major pandemic. But the challenge really is that how do we look at the future, spend more on health, spend more on nutrition, spend more on education, and use technology to leapfrog. Really, that is really the key, using technology to leapfrog, as we've done in both health and education, get into more R&D and get into the sunrise areas of growth. And many of these sunrise areas of growth, of genomics, etc., will be health related. And that will enable India to accelerate its growth process in the coming years.
Thank you. Pankaj, would you like to elaborate on both the research part of it as well as provide, you have a hospital also in Ahmedabad. So on a general healthcare, because as a pharmaceutical leader and a visionary, you are very familiar with what is happening in the healthcare scenario in India. You have some new thoughts, especially there has been some thinking on public-private partnership, where government has a lot of infrastructure facilities. So do you have any ideas on that? Would you like to share? You are on a mute.
Thank you, Abil. I will start with the second question first. You know, we tied up with the government of Gujarat to set up a hospital and a medical school in the tribal district of Gujarat called Dahod. And we set up a 750-bed hospital and a medical college there. And now there are hundreds of students studying there, and also the full-fledged college. When the COVID thing, we set up the whole district's COVID center there. And I'm happy to say that our success rate has been phenomenal, less than 1% death. And the point I'm trying to raise here is that it is possible that you do not require crores of rupees to run that hospital. if there is a public-private partnership, some of the infrastructure is given. Some additional infrastructure the private player has to add to provide modern, at least up to secondary care treatment to the people. And then with putting along with that education can actually create a kind of an efficient model to run a sustainable healthcare system, which is not dependent on the government grants and government support from a long-term perspective. And that is practically possible. And that's what we are clearly seeing that is done it. We did that first in Ahmedabad, which is currently doing postgraduate education. It's running 100% without any government support, and it operates at the zero charges for patients. Same thing is happening in Dawood. So I believe that public-private partnership in healthcare area could be a big thing to happen in a country like India, because that's the only way we can provide healthcare to everybody. That's the first important point. The second point about that, and I think Amitabh ji also said it correctly, we have to harness the scientific talent of India. The time has come that if we start and use the power of science and you harness the scientific talent, we can create difference in the world. Today, I know my colleagues and my friends in other countries, when they get COVID, they simply said, stay at home. But Dr. Pratap Reddy said correctly that when people went to him, he said, come and stay. I will provide you a hotel room where you can stay. We will monitor you. Or if you stay at home, our person will come and make sure that you are checked regularly. Now, that's a great service our country is providing. You don't find that anywhere else in the world. People are just left to stay at home. If there is oxygen level goes down below 90, come to hospital, we'll see if you have beds. Now, that's not the way our country or our government has behaved. We all collectively work together to make sure that everybody is taken care of. And then nobody looked at, how can I do it? It's not my job, it's government job. Or government never said, it's your job, it's not government job. I think that is the partnership between private sector and government is very important. And I think if we have to create a robust healthcare system in India, we should pursue more.
Thank you. Very rightly, you have said your experience public-private partnership has a great opportunity. Dr. Pratap Reddy, would you like to share some of those your visionary ideas of providing better healthcare, both private and public?
I think what our Aftab said is phenomenal, that we must increase our public spending to at least 5%, because that is necessary for not only treating people, but I think for prevention. So the greater emphasis now in 2021 onwards will be, how do we prevent people? So I think this is where many of us are making so much effort. Now, for example, we have brought in what is called the Pro Health, which will tell and give an individual his state of health. So anytime, anywhere he goes, his record is on his hand so that he can know what small things he could correct himself. So I think prevention should become the order of the day for the 21 onwards. The second thing, I think, whatever we think, there are three greater opportunities that healthcare is going to offer for the country. Number one, the medical value travel. I'm happy the government announced some, department and a huge amount of 3,000 crores. Unfortunately, COVID stayed it back. But today, if you look at India, we have the clinical excellence. We have the cost is 10% of the cost. We have two things which you can't buy with the douche marker $1. That is care and compassion. I think this is what is drawing people. People who were in major hospitals, Mayo, Mass General, they all flew in ambulances to our Proton Center in Madras because they have heard that in Indian healthcare, and they were so happy. At the end of the treatment, they all said, we would have never ever had this kind of treatment anywhere in the world. I think the medical value travel is a $400 billion industry. If only the government can push this in the various countries, and their offices act frankly. Like, first it started with Bangkok, then it went to Singapore, Malaysia, Germany. India could become the biggest, largest global healthcare capital. That is number one. The second thing is the services. India has these young people. If you can train them properly with this newer type of education, if you can give them, they could be not only useful for us in our country as our healthcare needs grow, but they could become the largest number of NRIs for sending their remittances back to the country. Because we have requests from several countries, from Japan to US to UK, everywhere there's a huge deficit of healthcare people. That is the third thing. And final thing is, we need to, he said, we need to encourage them. 40% of the medicines today are supplied by them. We should be proud of that, for what they're doing. We should see what can we support them. So I think more clinical trials, more research, and more importantly, what we need is to develop innovation and patent. If you develop patent in the country, the cost of the product is going to be very much less. The manufacturing before on medical side was very, very little. I still recollect when I interacted with the chairman of GE, he said, Dr. Reddy, you have only hardly a few hundred CTs. So when it became 1,000, I asked him, why did he manufacture? So he started the manufacture, and then when they did that, he said only Dr. Reddy should go and inaugurate that. But today, they are not only supplying large number of CT scans to the country, they are exporting. Similarly, ultrasound. I think this could become huge business for our country, providing employment, providing foreign exchange, and saving for a significant amount of foreign exchange from the country. I think healthcare now must say, whatever steps that we are taking now to control the COVID is, yes, it's very, very important. But I think if you look at this, automation and artificial intelligence is going to digitization and robotic surgeries and 3D printing. This is going to play a very significant role. This is where we should invest. We invested all that last year because the World Bank threatened us, saying by year 2020, 80% of the deaths will be from NCDs, and the cost burden for the world will be $30 trillion. For India, it will be $3.8 trillion. Why can we afford this kind of $3.8 trillion? And why should we? Because all of the diseases, diabetes, if it's controlled properly, it will not cause any other damage. Heart attacks, we know the various risk factors, if you detect through the preventive health checkup, you can prevent a heart attack, because heart attack in the Caucasian race and the Indian race is different. Because they get heart attack between 60 and 80, whereas we get a heart attack between 30 and 50. Now it's happening between 25 and 40. Similarly to the strokes, cancers are curable. I always tell my village, 3 years ago, we took up the village and started screening them. This year, they detected 19 cancers, 11 in women, 8 in men, all operated. So they will be cancer-free. So I think this is where I think our whole thought process and working towards, and with the support of Aftab, I think we can do many things to transform how we do things using technology, using digitalization, and then see what can it not only keep India healthy and happy, but also make India as a major foreign exchange earner. I'm positive. I think we do. We have already started what's called the Pro Health, which is using artificial intelligence. I'm the first one who started the health checkup program way back in '74 called Master Health Checkup. Then we changed it to Apollo Health Check. Today, it is a Pro Health using artificial intelligence, 22 million checkups. And it detects earlier enough, and this is where I think if you can prevent, prevention should become the key word in the entire healthcare focus that we do today. I can say many things, I think.
But I think you have given a wonderful ideas of healthcare, competitive advantage, new things we can do and play India a very big role. One of my question to
Only add one
Dr.
more thing. Can I just add one more?
Yeah, please go ahead.
I must thank Rotarians because we have started what's called the PINK program across the country for the Rotarians. And I think we are looking at the world for the Rotarians to do this PINK program. The PINK program is only on the prevention. How do we advise them on to stay well? What do they need to test themselves to know what their physical condition is? And then how can they stay better? So I think Rotarians and we are very close. I'm very, very keen on promoting the program, not just in India, world over for Rotarians. We want to give this, but the little what I've given them, I want to give this back to the Rotarians across the world. God bless.
Ajit, what are some prescription you can give, one or two areas which would propel the economy in next 12 months or so?
Yeah, Dr. Abil, looking back, I think the pandemic is merely an episode. Of course, it had very deep consequences, but it's an episode. That what I mean is that it has not changed the structural features of the Indian economy, the young demography, and the dynamics of the workforce and the potential for high growth. I'd like to reiterate what Mr. Amitabh Kant said, that this pandemic episode has reminded us that our spending on healthcare is woefully inadequate. In fact, it should double. And he also mentioned nutrition. Let's not forget that our rankings on hunger indices or on malnutrition are not very encouraging. So I would like to take advantage of Mr. Amitabh Kant's presence here to suggest a national campaign like we did midday meal scheme. India provides something like 110 million freshly cooked midday meals to school children, which is the biggest in the world. Let us also introduce 1 glass of milk per every child for breakfast every morning throughout the country, especially for the less privileged, because India is the largest milk producer in the world, 180 million tons. Yet our per capita consumption is low. Of course, I can exclude the lactose intolerant kids, but basically this is an idea which is worth pursuing. But on the larger question, Dr. Abil, I think, just to give an example of paramedical, for example, nurses, while we talk about the economy, let's also recognize that we are going to have more than 200 million people who are elderly. Surely we should be expanding much bigger healthcare and social security to the elderly. When we look at the size of Indian government, the central government spending as a percentage of GDP is only 15%. If you add state governments, another 10, so it's about 40%. Most European governments are at 55% of GDP. Even USA, which is much more free market oriented, is at 42%. So when we think our government is very large, let's keep that in context. But of course, all those governments spend substantially more on social security, which is care, including the care of the elderly, income and health security of the elderly. I think we are going to have a very large population of elderly, about almost 200 million and growing. We need to pay attention to that. And we don't have time today, but I know where will the resources come from? I mean, the question always is that to take care of doubling healthcare spending, taking care of social security of the elderly, where will the money come from? I think this money is available. I think we can have a substantial growth in the industrial and services economy. We need to be much more focused, outward focused, export earnings, and we should reprioritize government spending. That is, think of it as transferring resources from running many PSU, privatization agenda, and redeploy those funds towards healthcare. I think very briefly, that should be the strategy.
A very short question and a short answer. We are running out of time, but I will ask last question to Dr. Randeep Guleria. You are one of the leading pulmonologists in the country. Does the pollution in major city worries you because of the pandemic we have, which also affects the lung? Your observation and what do you think? Do we become more susceptible because of the high pollution?
Pollution is a cause of concern, especially in the Indo-Gangetic belt, and something that we've been working on for a long time as far as prevention is concerned, trying to look at various means. It's a multi-sectorial involvement and it has to have a lot of public participation. Coming to COVID, there is a lot of data from even SARS and now from Italy and even from US as a pre-published article, which has shown that in areas where pollution levels were high, there was a higher mortality because both of them cause inflammation in the lung and lead to worsening as far as COVID is concerned. So there is a link with worsening of COVID and increased COVID mortality with high levels of air pollution. So I think we need to really have a sustainable plan to tackle the problem of air pollution where multiple sectors, the health sector, the sector where pollution is being generated, and looking at it from the economy point of view and how we can find sustainable solution needs to be developed, because this is a problem which comes every year in the winter months and we forget about it in summer. I see this every year for the last more than 5 to 10 years. We have to find a sustainable solution. And I think COVID has taught us a lot in terms of how we can innovate, how we can move out of our silos and have multi-sectorial talks and develop strategies where people from different sectors can come together and do things. We started making ventilators, we started making PPEs, we started making N95. I'm sure we can find a solution if we all put our heads together.
Thank you very much to all of us and all of you for a very stimulating, interactive, and thought-provoking session we had in discussion amongst us. And someone has said rightly, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And I saw many ideas both on management of COVID, vaccination, healthcare sector, economy. Brilliant ideas have come. And I'm sure some of these ideas will get percolated and we will see newer India, an India which reinvent itself. And I believe that we are at the cusp of an opportunity to reinvent, reimagine, and recreate India of tomorrow. I think it was an intellectual feast of 75 minutes. And many Rotarians and viewers recognize that what we have seen is a collective 250 years of wisdom, experience, and knowledge among the panel members. Very, very distinguished panel members. And I would like to thank each one of you, Mr. Nandan Nilekani, who has just went away, Dr. Pratap Reddy, Mr. Maitab Khan, Dr. Randeep Guleria, Ajit Ranade, and Pankaj Patel. Thank you very much for being with us this evening on this Rotary International function. And I'm sure all the viewers of Rotarians and other viewers would have enormously benefited from the interaction which you shared with them. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you. Thank you.